Man on the plane suddenly vomited a lot. His body was covered with red rash. It seems to be an infectious disease. The doctor sitting next door saw him, but picked up a glass of wine and walked away. He went to the leader's seat. He offered to give him the first class seat. The silly leader even said thank you. Not long after that, the female passenger next to him also vomited. Her body was covered in the same red rash. House suspected the symptoms were bacterial meningitis. If nothing goes wrong, half the people on the plane would have died before reaching the terminal. To reduce panic, he went to the first class cabin. He lied and said the man had just gotten poisoned from eating the food on the plane. All everyone had to do was go to the bathroom and spit out the food, and they would be fine. The passengers left their seats. That's how House used first class as a quarantine area. He wanted to examine the patient here, and that's when the dean was also vomiting. House pulled the dean's shirt off. A large rash also appeared on his back. He tried to unzip the leader's pants, see if there are other symptoms. It's a good thing the flight attendant got here in time. Said there were 3 more passengers in the cabin with the same symptoms. It is imperative to get antibacterial medicine immediately. Otherwise, the whole cabin would be in trouble. So House asked the passengers to take out the medication they had with them. He mixed and matched the medications. He ended up with 3 antibacterial medications, but there were already 6 patients on board. The leader offered to give the medicine to the man with the worst case. Hauser objected, because antibacterials are not to be taken indiscriminately. If it's not meningitis, you're risking his life, unless we do a lumbar puncture. But there's no equipment here either. Hauser is a miracle doctor. He took the few tools he had from the cabin first aid kit. He makes a puncture needle out of a syringe needle and sticks it into the man's back. Within minutes, spinal fluid was flowing out of his body. Looking at the clear liquid, House had an answer in his mind. He picked up the radio and told everyone. One of the passengers had bacterial meningitis. It wouldn't take long for him to die. All the passengers on the plane would be infected. Those infected will experience vomiting, red rash. In the advanced stage, there will be tremors in the left hand. Sure enough, many passengers' left hands trembled involuntarily. Everyone thought they had been infected with bacterial meningitis. Just then, House said loudly that it was just a test. Your symptoms are not meningitis at all. They are pseudoneurological symptoms caused by stress. It happens at high altitudes and in uncomfortable situations. If one person sees someone else vomiting, that thought is immediately implanted in your brain. The brain will think you are sick, and then you get the same symptoms. This leads to a chain reaction. As soon as you calm down, the symptoms will disappear immediately. That's when the passengers relaxed. Upon returning to the quarantine area, House told the dean the man's test results were negative. Although the man was not suffering from bacterial meningitis, but he was really dying. House didn't know what was wrong with the man. To find out the cause, House began diagnosing on the plane, and he had a passenger who didn't know anything about it as his assistant. The kid said the man looked a bit like a drug dealer. An unintentional comment made House realize the man probably had drugs in his system, causing his body to have a rejection reaction. The drugs needed to be taken out immediately, otherwise he would be dead for sure. But then the question arose, how do you operate on a plane? Apparently, this was not a problem for House. He made a scalpel out of a blade and a pen, using a dinner plate as a surgical tray. Then he used Mautai instead of anesthetic. He prepared to operate on the plane. He had the passengers hold the man's limbs down, and that's when House noticed that when the man's arms were pinned down, his symptoms disappeared. When the man was released, his symptoms began to appear again. It seems that he had misdiagnosed the problem again. House found a diving license in the man's wallet. The man must have gotten on the plane immediately after the dive. The pressure difference was too great. The nitrogen in his blood formed bubbles. That's why his body was abnormal. As soon as the plane descended to 5,000 meters, give the man enough oxygen, his symptoms will disappear. Luckily, it was just a false alarm. Their child stuffs a toy cop up his nose. The doctor was able to pinch it out. But the next day, the father brought the child back to the hospital, said that the child's nose was again blocked by something. This time, the doctor plucked a fireman out of his nose. House was so helpless. He told him to watch the child. Don't let the kid play with this toy again. The father said he would watch over him like an eagle hunting in the future. But on the 3rd day, the father brought him back to the hospital. Same symptoms. The child wouldn't stop crying. Hauser said impatiently,
"Stop, or I snap your nose off."
Then the child stopped. This time, House pinched a nose out of the child. The father of the fire truck, in order not to be educated by House, that his son wasn't very smart. Genetics is a powerful force. House put 3 toys together. The more the police fireman and the fire truck looked at them, the more they didn't look right. House thought there must be something else on the kid's nose, so he rushed to get a magnet out of the cabinet. After a brief test of the magnetism, he came to the boy's side. He pointed the magnet at the child's nose. A kitten was immediately sucked out. So the kid was trying to save the kitten from his nose. So they sent the police, firefighters and fire engines to rescue the kitten. Your son is a genius. The father was very proud of his son's behavior. I have to say, cannot let the father take the children or a reason. Woman with seizure collapses and convulses. Not only is she incontinent, and her urine was still green, and the doctor concluded that she was faking it. House found a bottle of potassium suboxide in the woman's bag. It's a drug that turns urine green. He decided to expose the woman. So House went to the woman's room, and he pulls out a flash and flashes it at her. This induces a seizure. The woman immediately rolls her eyes and convulses. That's a good one. House had to do something humiliating to her. The woman came to her senses immediately. She was really faking it. Hauser told her to go home and stop fooling around, but the woman didn't want to go. She asked House to save her, because a cat had predicted that she was going to die. House said, "You're full of shit. How can a cat predict the life and death of a person?" And then he turned around and left, to prove it to herself. The next day, the woman took the cat straight to the hospital. hospital. This is the cat of death. He has predicted the death of dozens of people. The doctor's diagnosis is not as accurate as his. As long as he is lying next to him, there is no chance of survival. This time it was my turn. Apparently House didn't believe her. The woman pulled out the tape. She said the contents of the tape would prove she wasn't lying. After that, the woman suddenly fainted. After an examination, this time it wasn't faked. The woman had bronchitis. Now House was a little more convinced. He started to check the video of the prophecy cat. Just like the woman said, anyone who gets this cat on their side will die a strange death. To verify this, Hauser took the so-called death cat to the intensive care unit. There were 3 high-risk patients. Hauser placed the cat next to patient number 1. The cat didn't get down. Put it next to patient number 2. The patient suddenly had a red bump on his hand. After examining the patient, it was found that the patient was just allergic to the cat. Just then, the cat suddenly got down next to patient number 3. The next depends on whether the patient can live through the night. And the woman who was lying down by the death cat found that her urine had changed from green to brown. The doctors were confused. Why is a woman's urine green at one time and then brown? House said there was only one reason. That is the red color. Due to bronchitis, the intestines bleed. Green plus red will turn brown. But the woman had a new symptom. Her back was covered in reticulated veins. The assistant called House immediately to tell him the woman would not live to see tomorrow because patient number 3, the one who had been lying down with the cat, had just passed away. This meant that the cat's prediction was true. House immediately played back the video of the cat. He wanted to find the answer in it. Just then, the cat came running in, and then it landed on the computer next to House. House was confused. Is this going to take me away? He touched the computer. It was hot. He looked at the tape. Something occurred to Hauser. He finally knew why cats could predict the life and death of people. He took the woman to the intensive care unit. Tell him, cats just want to find a warm place to sleep, and a dying person's body usually gives off heat. This is exactly where cats like to be. As for why the cat is lying next to you, it's because you had bronchitis a few days ago, and the fever is just a symptom, including the reticulated veins on your body. It's the same thing. This is the end of the myth of the deadly cat.